Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and today I have the folks from Norfolk Healthy Produce. You might know them better as the developer of the purple tomato. And yes, there's plenty of purple tomatoes out there, but this one is special. So joining me is the CEO, Dr. Nathan Plumpton, and Ian Baker, who I've known for quite a while. Thanks, guys, for joining me.
Thanks so much for having us, Marlene. It's great to be here.
So you guys are actually local.
That's right. We're based in Davis, California, and happy to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about let's just explain a little bit about the purple tomato before we go into the history of it, because people probably think, oh yeah, I grow purple tomatoes. What's unique about this one? Because it's not just purple on the outside, right?
Yep. So the special thing about our purple tomato is it's purple all the way throughout the fruit, throughout the whole flesh. And all the other purple tomatoes that are out there have usually a little bit on the shoulders, and it's in response to light. So it's very variable. And again, what's special about ours, we have higher levels of these purple pigments. So it's really a striking fruit, especially when you cut it open. And the way that we did it was through bioengineering, by combining it with an edible flower, snapdragon.
Okay, so we'll get into that a bit, but it was developed, I guess, years ago in the UK. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. It was developed by a professor, Kathy Martin, who's a world-leading researcher in nutritional fortification of plants. And she found it through her research, really just trying to understand how do flowers produce pigments, and how do different types of fruits and vegetables accumulate different nutrients.
So it started in the UK and now it's in Davis. How did it make that journey?
Yeah, it was quite long, quite circuitous, and as always, very serendipitous. So Kathy developed the tomato first in 2008 in the UK and was looking for opportunities for people to be able to grow it in their gardens and to be able to eat it. And I connected with Kathy and her team almost 4 years ago now. I was already living in Davis, California, and they said, hey, we have the purple tomato. We have all the pieces together that we need to bring it out to market. We're looking for someone to pull them all together and do it. And I thought, I live in Davis already, and has such a wonderful history of producing fruits and vegetables and also developing new types of innovative technologies. It's kind of a match made in heaven.
So what's your background? Are you plants, science?
I'm plants. So I have a PhD in plant molecular biology. I spent about 20 years in research and development, a lot of that in universities, and then also at a company, which is where Ian and I first met. And my research had pretty much always focused on the interaction between plants and microbes, either symbiosis to try to find ways to have plants grow more efficiently. My PhD was on mycorrhiza, which probably many of your listeners know, the fungi that live in soil. So I was understanding how genes work in plants. And one of the things I did in my research actually was I made a lot of bioengineered GMO plants that had fluorescent proteins. So I could look at them in a microscope and look at this hidden organization that cells have, which is really quite beautiful and fundamental to life. And so it was really the technical side that brought me into what we're doing today.
And then Ian, you came in because you have a background in growing the plants and managing greenhouses, correct?
Yeah, and a lot of other things, facility management. I basically bring science to the real world and vice versa. So primarily a grower, but I make things happen in the greenhouse. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are actually growing plants and harvesting seed in Davis?
That's correct? Exactly right. Yep. So we do breeding, we do seed production, we do trialing, which is, of course, growing different varieties and deciding, which ones are great, which ones are terrible.
Yeah.
And and we're quite unique. We're a tiny little company. And so Ian is really a MacGyver among many other things. We wouldn't be here without his particular skill set.
Oh no, I know he managed the research greenhouses and he took them out of like, the 15th century into modern day. I'm like, well, what are you doing? He's like, there's these modern things called sensors that you could hook up to your phone. I'm like, whoa.
It was a low bar. I mean,
That is true.
it was a lot of fun though.
That is true. So I want to circle back to where Kathy developed it. Like when she was playing around with the genes and the pigments, this was just a byproduct, and she didn't go about wanting to make an edible purple tomato. She just was playing with pigments, and then she realized, oh man, this has a whole bunch of anthocyanins in it. I could be onto something. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So she was not trying to make a purple tomato. What she was trying to do was understand what is it about plants that allow them to make different nutrients, and specifically this class called flavonoids.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy is a childhood diabetic, and so she's particularly sensitive to the impact that diet has on her own health and well-being. One of her favorite quotes is that pharmaceuticals and drugs are not healthcare; they're sick care, and food is healthcare.
That's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, if we could stop people from needing the pharmaceuticals by telling them, well, we do tell them what to eat, but if they actually listened. So for the most part, right? I don't even listen half the time. So, okay.
Well, to that point, you're absolutely right on. And I think there's so many phenomenal fruits and vegetables out there in the world that we can grow, that we can eat.
Mm-hmm.
And yet so many people and all of us in our decisions, it's so easy to go after convenient food, after sweet food, after processed food. And I do think the purple tomato, for some people in some little ways, is an extra little nudge of, hey, here's a sexy, very healthy, fresh produce item that you can go for. And I want to answer your question because, of course, it's a long way to getting to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, as a basic scientist, was interested in just understanding what is the mechanism, what are the genes that allow plants to make anthocyanins and other antioxidants. And she found in snapdragon that there were 2 genes that seem to be required. So that means if you have a purple snapdragon flower and you lose those genes, that flower becomes white.
Okay.
And so I'm going to get a little nerdy, but I think I can do it in a simple enough way. And it's really fascinating to kind of understand where the science came from.
Mm-hmm.
She said, okay, if you destroy these genes, if these genes are lost in flowers, you lose color. What happens if you add those genes to another plant? If these are really on switches, if these are regulators, then maybe you would take something that's not purple and make it purple. And it's one of these lucky coincidences. Next door to her lab in the UK was a lab that worked on tomato, and they routinely put different genes in. And so she said, hey, let's collaborate. What if we put these snapdragon genes into a tomato? And as we said at the outset, tomatoes can, in some cases, make a little bit of the purple pigments.
Mm-hmm.
So they put the snapdragon genes in, and lo and behold, and there's some elegance in there too that gets really nerdy. But lo and behold, those tomatoes started green, and when they started to ripen, they turned purple.
Because most of the time it's the opposite. Because I think when people think, oh, I have a purple tomato, I know when I grow them, they start out purple and then they fade away. And then, of course, when you cut open, they're red for the most part. But this one starts green, and then it just turns more and more purple, and then inside it's purple. I have
That's exactly right.
Go ahead.
Well, the plant scientist in me can't just leave that alone. So one of the things that's really beautiful about the diversity in life around us is you have something like purple in a tomato. That's a property which tomatoes can do. There's a whole timing part that's completely separate from that. So do you have purple early? Do you have purple late? And that's sort of the coordination of life that biologists study. And it's one of those things when you start to look at genes and start to look at biochemistry, you can start to have this window into how life functions that otherwise is completely opaque. And so that's really, I think it's worthwhile emphasizing where the purple tomato came from. Completely this curiosity driven science of, boy, I wonder how this works. And that's where we came from.
I when I read snapdragons, that was interesting because when I think snapdragons, I don't think purple pigments, but it was there are purple flowers. Why? How did she try other flowers? Because I would think, being the non-research scientist, that I would take something that had way more anthocyanins already in it and go, "Oh, hey, this is how I'm going to make it work."
Yeah, so actually, I kind of misspoke. The snapdragons that it came from are much more red in color, and so think of a dark red snapdragon.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting is the genes from snapdragon. What they do is they turn on synthesis production of these anthocyanin pigments, and the color that the anthocyanins are completely depends on the species that you're in. So if you're in snapdragon, they look more red. If you're in purple, they look purple. If you're in tomatoes, they look purple. If you're in blueberries, they look a little bit more bluish. And there's about 600 different types of anthocyanins in the plant kingdom.
So it's not just, they're broken down into many. We just hear anthocyanins and we know purple.
Exactly. And they're also pH dependent, so they can change color based on how acidic the cells are around them.
So let's talk a little bit about why anthocyanins are so important. People have heard them. People have heard of antioxidants, but I think, people know they're good and they may know they're, purple or red, but what are the benefits and why is this sort of like, this is important if we can make healthy fruit healthier?
Yep. So anthocyanins, as you say, they're a type of antioxidant, and they have unique beneficial properties as shown by a lot of scientific studies. And this is a growing field of research. There's a growing body of evidence. It's very good for heart health, for lung health. They have anti-cancer properties. And there's also growing evidence they have impacts on behavioral and some markers of mental health. And so this is quite clear for anthocyanins as a whole. One of the things that Kathy did in her first study with purple tomatoes was feed and extract dried powder of purple tomatoes to mice, which were extremely cancer prone.
Okay.
So she did a nice controlled study. She had a group of mice that got a little bit of purple tomatoes supplemented in their food, another set of mice that got red tomatoes, and another set of mice that got no tomatoes. And she found that those mice that got the purple tomatoes lived about 30% longer.
Wow. That's a pretty big span.
Indeed. And again, it's a mouse model and they're cancer mice. And so one of the things as a scientist, we're not trying to overclaim the benefits. What we know is there's a lot of people who are looking to eat blueberries because of the health benefits, looking to eat more antioxidants. And people in the US eat about 20 times more tomatoes than they do blueberries by weight in a year. And so we see this as really a wonderful opportunity for people to get these in their diet a bit more.
I want to now touch upon the topic that makes this very controversial. What exactly is genetically modified, and why do you think it's getting? Some people just are so concerned about it, or do you think they just don't understand, or do you think? I mean, how would you explain it to them that it's okay?
Yeah, the most important thing to start with, because of course, we get this question all the time. Actually, the vast majority of people are completely fine with GMOs. And what's very interesting is I talk to a lot of people about this, and I say, how do you feel about eating this GMO tomato? And about 80 to 90% of people say, I'm completely fine with it. I really want this. And then I ask, what do you think about other people? And they say, well, other people don't want this.
Mm.
There's sort of this imaginary group of other people who are against GMOs. And there are some people who don't want them.
Uh-huh.
Vast majority of people are completely fine with it. And so I'm happy to go into that granular detail. One of the things that's really important for some of your listeners who say, I don't want to eat GMOs, I'm not okay with it. I'm very sympathetic to that. And there are tons of options out there. If you go to the store and you get organic produce that is guaranteed to be non-GMO, of course, just about all fruits and vegetables are non-GMO. And so it's very easy to avoid it if you want to avoid it. If you're like so many people who do want to get some better fruits and vegetables because they've benefited from some of our scientific understanding, this is kind of the controversial thing that we're doing by bringing this to market. And so to answer your question on what is a GMO, the way people typically see this is a plant that has had some DNA added to it from another species. So in some cases, this is from another plant, which is how our purple tomato was made. In other cases, this may be DNA from a bacteria. And a lot of people have associations that they think GMOs have pesticides in them or spray herbicides on them. And that has been one of the uses of GMOs. It is completely independent, though, how you use a GMO. Ours does not have a pesticide in it. We don't spray Roundup on it, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to know. I'm glad that's where you're coming from. I think it's the same. Usually the negatives stick with you more. So most people I know, of course, are fine with GMO, but it's those few that probably stick in my head. And I just assume, oh, there's more people like that out there who, so that's good because it's only going to, this is only going to benefit us down the road for so many. I mean, we already know it's helping with food production. And yes, even if, there's some that are herbicide resistant, you may or may not believe in that. But, when farmers are trying to basically feed the world and you're sort of up against certain regulations, rightly so, sometimes you gotta, we got to come up with different ways because it's not easy grown food.
Yeah, and it's about the objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you engineering something so that you can douse it in Roundup, or are you engineering something so that it's healthier?
Yeah,
it's pretty.
Yeah.
You've got such a vocal minority sort of saying GMO bad, and it's on so many labels that people just think, oh, I'm supposed to think this, but there's an emerging, I don't know, sentiment that people are like figuring out the nuance, and the word is spreading that it's not black or white.
Yeah. So, Ian, how would you describe the tomato as a fruit? Like, I think size-wise, taste-wise, and then growth-wise.
We have a primarily like one variety in the moment that's available publicly. I guess that's fair to say, and it's a large cherry-sized fruit. Okay. And so it's indeterminate. It's
indeterminate. Okay, it keeps growing.
Growth habit as a typical cherry tomato. I would say that taste-wise, it's got this really, traditional tomato flavor, balanced in sweetness and acidity, and an incredible amount of umami, which a lot of that has to do with other background genetics. It's not necessarily related to the anthocyanin. But we are, of course, working on breeding other varieties of purple tomatoes in all the tomato formats that people want.
So is it a tall? Does it get like 6 feet tall?
Well, it's indeterminate, right? So most people are used to a determinate tomato that grows to a specific height in your garden and stops growing. And, an indeterminate will basically grow like a vine indefinitely until it is so long that it can't take up nutrients or water through its long stem. So in our greenhouse, for example, we prune all the suckers off to one main vine, and it can get up to 20 30 feet long
Wow.
easily.
Okay.
But, in your garden, you can prune it
Yeah.
to be right. But there's definitely some trellising involved for our main variety.
Are you growing them all in a greenhouse, or are you doing some outside plots?
We in terms of what we do on site here, we're all in greenhouse. We do work with some other small growers in other locations, and I think that there's going to be some growing outdoors this year, and that'll be the first time, really.
We've done some growing outdoors with some of our partners, and one of the things that we've done, this kind of goes back to your question of a biotechnology product and talking with the market. There's a lot of farmers who reached out to us and really wanted to grow and sell purple tomatoes, and so we got started selling tomatoes at farmers markets. And the growers are sort of a mix of growing in high tunnels and lower tech greenhouses, and also out in the field.
Okay, so it's going to be sold at farmers markets.
Yeah, and so we have run a farmers market booth at the Davis Farmers Market, which has been a really wonderful, uplifting experience. It's really fun to be able to talk to people at the farmers market about the purple tomato, see how people react, listen to them. I learn a tremendous amount. And it's kind of a surprise when people think about, I thought GMOs were, not something that was compatible with the farmers market.
Yeah.
And there's about 10 farmers markets throughout the US where there's growers selling purple tomatoes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm be interested. I mean, Davis is known to be very environmentally forward, and people are usually very aware of topics that of their concern. So, and it's one of the biggest farmers markets. So it's good to hear that you're getting at least people who are listening and understanding. I mean, there's smart people in Davis, so a lot of scientists, but that doesn't stop people's fear.
So it's really funny because it kind of plays in what we were just talking about earlier, this sort of perceived boogeyman of when we started at the farmers market, people were like, oh, are you gonna have people there not necessarily protesting you, but sort of being adversarial or whatever. And that 0%. Even people who are dubious about GMOs are super interested in having conversations about it. And it's uplifting, like Janae's point. It's really cool to see.
That's really good. I can't say that I've heard anything negative recently. I think maybe the people have maybe read more, educated themselves more on knowing. Of course, you're going to have the people who are just outright no. And I don't think anything's going to change their mind. They're just set in their ways. So,
but I think there's reasonable reasons that people are against biotechnology when they see it as a part of, let's say, large multinational companies that are, they feel are controlling the food system, and they have concerns, much more about that system, and they see GMO as a component of that. What's really fascinating for me, having been a plant molecular biologist, talking to people about the science of GMOs. It's one thing to talk to people about science and saying, hey, you should really read this. Who likes to hear that?
Yeah.
Nobody. It's completely different if you say, hey, we made this purple tomato. Would you like to try it? And it's just it's a completely different kind of interaction to have with people. And it's so much fun.
So Ian, of course, I know you're going to say just all wonderful things about it, but as far as growing it, have you had any, usually the only pests that get tomatoes could be, spider mites, maybe a little bit of thrips, but I imagine you haven't had any issues with Phytophthora. That's more of a soil thing anyways, but it's pretty easy to grow.
I mean, honestly, in the grand scheme of what I'm used to growing, which is a lot of different stuff, it's not bad. And it's funny to say that because we're surrounded by literally thousands of acres of tomato fields. As soon as harvest happens, the whiteflies don't have a home and they're rushing in.
Yeah.
So some of the standard arthropod pests, sure. We haven't, there's always fungal pathogens. We're particularly concerned about viruses, right? You know,
DMB,
you get that in your greenhouse. That's not fun.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
not bad.
I just remember you being the only person who was like, "Hey, maybe we should do something about these viruses that are running rampant in these research greenhouses." And everyone looked at you like you had two heads, like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Yeah. No, I mean, good phyto protocol. We do a foot bath, and we're careful about
Okay. Yeah.
working in there. But it's all about managing the pest load. The thrips is what'll get you
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of bringing in virus if it's not a human.
Yeah. And then growing it in greenhouse, so people know growing in greenhouse is completely different. Most people are going to be growing them outside where there's so many natural predators that are going to be taking care of them. But yeah. So you guys are growing to harvest the seed. Are you selling plants or just seeds at this time?
So our main business is in selling the seeds.
Okay.
And we are so last year, also at the Davis Farmers Market, we sold a small batch of seedlings. One of the things, so we started selling seeds to gardeners last year, and we heard a lot of feedback from people who said, "Hey, I don't really know what to do with seeds. I always go to my local garden center and buy transplants to put in my garden. So where can I buy transplants?" And we have now a few distributors in the US who are selling purple tomato seedlings to garden centers this year. And we're looking to build that up in coming years. And then the tomatoes that we sell are really just so people can become familiar with the fruit. We are not commercial farmers by any imagination. We're really breeders and seed producers. And it is such a, just being a gardener is a heck of a lot of work, and being a commercial farmer is, there's fantastic people doing that, and we want to help.
So you guys are relatively small, as you said. So so you guys have different products sort of queued up and you don't have to talk about them, of course, but you hoping to expand on this? And if so, do you guys have in-house researchers, or how is that going about?
So we are very small. We're 5 full-time people.
Okay.
And mainly what we're focused on is new types of purple tomatoes.
Okay.
So what we've seen is that people really love purple tomatoes. And what we hear often is, I want a big tomato that I can slice and put on a sandwich. I'd really like to be able to get purple tomato juice and purple tomato salsa. And so all of those are different varieties of tomatoes. And one of the cool things about how the purple works, because it's bioengineered, is we can breed with a bunch of different types of tomatoes, and we can a huge diversity of purple tomatoes. So that's really what we're focused on right now.
So that's what I was wondering. You don't have to give your trade secrets, but how many tomatoes did you use before I imagine you settled on one variety as what you're using? And so is that the process? You're just picking tomatoes that would be the size that you want, maybe have the flavor profile. Is that correct?
So it's a bit like that. I think, it's helpful to understand that we don't ever settle on a single variety.
Okay.
We would like to have, a few different types of large beefsteak tomatoes that are, and we'd like to have a processing tomato that we can grow here in California that's purple. And we'd like to have, a few different cherry tomatoes that are purple. And so, any kind of tomato you can think of there could be a purple version of it.
Okay.
And, what grows well in California is very different from what grows well in a garden in Florida, or a garden in New England, or a garden in Oklahoma. And so, gardening and plant varieties are really all about diversity. And what we're aiming for is for next year's garden season to have a few new varieties. And then we'd like to keep expanding the number of purple tomato varieties.
Okay. And have you thought about doing some crazy other fruit?
We certainly have. We certainly have. And purple peppers are kind of the next obvious step.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
There's a few other fruits that we've talked about. And, this is where maybe I'm kind of boring because it is it's really, really hard to make these types of new fruits and vegetables. And, Kathy developed it in 2008, and we're just now, as of last year, first had a product on the market. And so one of the things I think it's really helpful for people to hear is it's not like, oh, hey, we made this GMO and 3 weeks later we have this new kind of tomato. Even though we can use science and technology, we still need to do plant breeding. It's still gardening. You only get one season a year, maybe you get 2 or 3. But we are still subject to the normal biological laws. And so it's a low probability proposition to get this kind of a product.
So
and say we're gonna make 10 more like this next year. We want to make sure we have a really, really excellent quality, diverse selection of purple tomatoes, and we'll build from there.
So getting to the point, so it's genetically stable. So you could think of it as like an heirloom that is sort of genetically stable. Is that correct? So each generation it takes.
That is correct, and it is extremely controversial to say whether this is an heirloom or not. And you probably know different people have different definitions of heirlooms and how long they need to be passed down, for instance. It does function for all intents and purposes like an heirloom.
Okay.
Well, and it's also, we're saying, like, because it's genetically stable, this purple trait, it's heritable. We're basically doing traditional breeding here.
Yes.
Like, it's when people think GMO, it's like white lab coats and pipettes, science happening. And like, that happened a long time ago to sort of create this purple trait. But what we're doing now is very traditional plant breeding, collecting pollen, dusting flowers and making crosses and evaluating. So for that reason, it's labor intensive. We're a small company. We're really just focused on making killer products.
No, and I think that's important for people to know that that's not what you're doing in the greenhouse in the lab now. You're doing standard breeding that has been done for hundreds, thousands of years. I don't know how long of breeding. And then that's why it takes so long from just the initial. I'm sure there's extra steps, but to just get that stable. I'm friends with Brad from the Wild Boar tomatoes, and he makes his own, and just
tie-dye, right?
Yes, exactly. A lot of the purple ones that are purple in their own way. How about that? So yeah, and he just tells me it's X number of years to get it stable. So it's always like, oh, are those heirlooms? Well, they're stable varieties basically. So I don't know. I mean, the heirloom, in my opinion, is something that's been around for a long time, but this is a stable genetic variety, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And, I think I hear 2 different perspectives from gardeners. One is, hey, I only want to grow varieties that are heirloom and that have been around for a long time. Or I really love Sun Gold, and I really love, some of these varieties that haven't been around forever. And, what's great is that there's all sorts of different options. And most of us in our gardens, we plant different things, and we have heirlooms that have been around for a very long time, and we have more recent varieties. And that's part of the fun, is then, see how they do. So Marlene, I'm curious, while we're on this topic, what are some of your favorite tomato varieties?
Okay. Well, I hate to say this is Sun Gold, it really is a dang good tomato. I will say I don't have the best palate. To me, I've done a few taste test competitions where they've had me, and Sun Gold's won most of the time. I think because it has that tartness to it along with a little bit of sweetness. I do like a Cherokee Purple. I don't know if the description has made me think that the smokiness is in there, but I think I can taste a little bit of the smokiness. I tend to like a tart one. The Brad's Atomic Grape is a beautiful, oblong cherry tomato, and the colors are amazing. And, I probably pick it before it's a little ripe enough, but I tend to like things a little tart, and I've dehydrated that one, and it's like candy. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not some people just are oh, this is my favorite. And I'm like, okay, I can't really taste the difference. I go off of beauty. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
if something's pretty, I like it.
I was gonna say I like it. I like a pineapple, and like I would grow that or other heirloom
Uh-huh.
varieties in my garden in Davis if it also came with a great disease package.
I,
But when I plant some of these heirlooms, like it just doesn't work out because of the pest load where I'm at.
or sometimes the amount. People want these giant beefsteaks or these giant true older heirlooms that aren't bred for productivity. And
Yeah.
they're disappointed when they only get like one. And
Yeah.
so when I see, I always plant a celebrity, I always plant an early girl because I know those ones are going to produce just the standard red tomato. And if I just need a standard red tomato, I'll do that. But I really do like the pretty ones. That's what gets me. So, I mean, purple is right up my alley. So, and I do like the cherry tomatoes because I go out when I'm gardening, I just eat the cherry tomatoes off of the plant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they're so productive,
Mhm.
and they've always been my favorite. Sun Gold is sort of what got me started in tomatoes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just dang, that thing will not. I mean, it just wins. It wins. And I will tell you that I can't stand a yellow pear cherry tomato. I think they're blah tasting. I get it; they're pretty in a salad cut up, but I just do not think they have any taste. I don't know, but I've learned throughout the years I'm not planting as many tomatoes as I used to.
Yeah.
It's like, how many do you really need? I mean, I know you could give them away, but I'm like, is anyone going to come and pick them for me? Because that's the pain in the butt part.
Yeah. I do that with my peppers too.
Yeah. I will say there are some beautiful peppers out there. And we had a student who grew Carolina Reapers last year at work. And oh man, we had a lot of those.
Those are fun. Yeah, you only need like one.
Yeah, you only need like, one your whole life.
I think that's what my brother was just chasing down for his garden this year.
Oh yeah. Well, we have plants still, so we have all the fruit still in the fridge as it's rotting. I'm like, I think you've missed the window to harvest that seed. And he's like, no. I'm like, yeah, no. I think it's moldy now. So bad harvesting procedures. Okay, so where can people find more out about this, and where can they buy some seed? What if they're not local?
So for information, the best place to go is to our website, which is norfolkhealthyproduce.com. And if you type into Google Norfolk and purple tomatoes, you'll find us really quickly.
Okay.
And there's an FAQ page there, and you can order seeds direct from our website.
Okay.
So that's the main place. I do want to give a plug for Redwood Barn Nursery, Davis, which has our seed packets stocked right now. So if you're local in Davis and you want to stop in and say hi to Don, highly recommend that.
Awesome. Yeah, support local all the way around. Local business. And
the whole think globally and act locally thing is near and dear to my heart. And so it's being at the Davis Farmers Market, being a Redwood Barn Nursery. This is the kind of thing that is really been gratifying for this project, to go from something where, oh, it's a GMO, I don't know about that, to, hey, look, we think it's beautiful and we like how it grows. And, can you get us bigger tomatoes? How can you push the flavor? This becomes now a really fun part of the conversation.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you guys are coming out. And I always say, oh, shop local. But guess what? If you're not local, go online and buy their seed. So you always got to remember that. You got to, sometimes it's okay not to shop local, right? Sometimes you got to do mail order. It's important.
We need a mix of all these things.
Yes, exactly. Well, any last parting words, Ian, about the tomato, growing it? Any failures?
Any failures? I mean, of course, it wouldn't be growing if there were failures. Complex biological systems coupled with complex, physical systems to make it work. But if you're going to grow these in your garden, be prepared to trellis them.
Yeah.
Good pruning strategy is important.
Okay.
Tomatoes are funny because there's a lot of like mythology around, how you handle them, and you have to do X. I think it's pretty straightforward. Good fertilizer, soil, regular water, trellis, good pruning.
And I was going to say, so you prune, but you prune mainly just to contain them, right? Else you would have them going everywhere, because I never prune my cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit also about the steering strategy, and
Mm-hmm.
our objectives here are
Mm-hmm.
more breeding focused. Although, if you were to go into a commercial greenhouse, they're going to be pruning them the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with the labor and how you manage the plant in the greenhouse environment. You don't have to be so strict in your home garden necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah, I just want to sort of clarify that, people. I think it's getting so much online that you have to prune your tomatoes and you have to do this 1 liter. It's so different if you have like 7 tomato plants outside with the space. Inside, if you're trying to do space savings, obviously inside air circulate. I mean, air circulation is important for both sun exposure, but the pests inside a greenhouse are going to be more problematic than outside.
Yep.
So it's, I just,
The-
go ahead.
Well, I have to say, Marlene, one of the really fun things about where we sit is we get letters and emails from gardeners all the time showing off, especially last season, how they grew the plants. And, some kept one main leader, trimmed all the suckers, had them super long. Other ones let them go really bushy. Some people had really elaborate hydroponic systems that
Oh,
they put on their front porch. And there's so many different ways to grow the same variety of tomato.
and you could even
And
let it cascade over. I had one last year, a tomato that I just let, it was up on a raised thing. And I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. You're going to trail over. You'd have to worry about the weight sometimes of some of them snapping, but yeah,
we have someone in the company who's been growing one in his house for the
Oh.
last year and a half, and there's like one little skylight window that it's getting its light from, and it just keeps hanging on, it keeps growing,
Oh.
and it just put out a new flush of fruit. So
Oh,
has
because
a will to live.
yeah, because they're indeterminate. They are perennial plants.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, this was fun. I'm glad you guys are getting really good feedback, because I wasn't sure if it's, you sort of had to duck your head when you went to the farmer's market, but it sounds like everyone's really accepting, and it's only good for science, and it's only good for future food and just the welfare and health of people. That's why I'm always glad there's much smarter people than me in the world figuring these things out, because I wouldn't know the first step.
Well, Marlene, I have to say, this is not a one-sided conversation from our side. And, I don't think it's about smart people and less smart people. I think.
Oh, it's about smarter people. Oh, yeah.
I know you're. Well,
let's be honest.
I think it's so important that we have a very large and inclusive conversation about our food system. And I think that's why GMOs initially were so controversial, because there wasn't that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And what really is, it's so important to all of our health and well-being. It's such a cultural foundation for most people. And I really think it's, we're listening all the time as we're trying to share, why it is that we think this bioengineered tomato is really great. And I want to, that's sort of my optimistic note, that when it comes to so many technologies, that we'll really take the opportunity to talk to each other with curiosity and with openness, and try to understand, hey, so I always heard GMOs were bad, and here's these folks at the farmers market selling GMO tomatoes. I mean, what's going on with that? And again, it's kind of been a really inspiring, hopeful response that we've seen, that so many people do come with curiosity and openness, and we match that curiosity and openness, and I think that's that takes us all in the direction I think we want to go.
Good. No, that's great. And I think hopefully I know people will buy them, and I know people will enjoy them, and we can't wait to see what your next product is. So until next time, everyone, happy gardening.